Okay, everyone, we're live. Good morning, Hartwell. How are you this morning?
Good morning, Kris. Good morning, everyone. I'm well. Thank you for
Awesome.
asking.
You're welcome. So, quite surprised by the subject this matter this week as I didn't know anything about it and opened it up to read it and was like, "Oh, here we go. Here's something
Mhm.
that we hadn't talked about or chatted about." The subject that we're talking about today is the channels that are defined by opposition. So, can you tell us, are there more channels that are more common than any others?
Yeah, there are three that are more common in the general population. Why are they more common? Well, if you've been following along with us, you know that the incarnation cross is formed by the opposition of the sun and the earth. Um, so you've got the sun and the earth from the design side, and the sun and the earth from the personality side, and they make a cross. But the sun and earth are always in opposition. And so it only happens in three cases that when the sun and moon are in their, sun and earth are in their opposite gates, that those actually form a channel. Okay. Almost, pretty much every other case, I have the sun in gate one and the earth in gate two. Those do not form a channel.
Mm-hmm.
But three times in the year, there are times where if you're born with your sun in a certain place, then the earth in its place forms a channel.
Okay.
Okay. There's
Mm-hmm.
only three places that happens. And
Mm-hmm.
of course, the north and the south node are always in opposition to each other as well.
Right.
So they can also, by themselves, the sun, the north node and south node, if they're in those particular gates, they can form a channel. All right.
Right.
So, what are those four channels? I mean, three channels. um, so, anytime you have somebody with their sun in a particular gate, um, gate 37, then there's going to be a channel because the opposition is gate 40. And 37 and 40 make up the channel of community. So this is one of the most common channels in the population because it is birthed by the opposition of sun and earth or north node and south node. So the 3740 is called the channel of community. It's of a design of being apart, seeking a whole. So on the one side, you have the gate of aloneness, gate 40, which loves to work for the sake of tribe and family when the bargain is right. In gate 37, the gate of friendship is about warmth and connection and affection and, a bargain made on a handshake. So the 3740 is really at the heart of community. It's
Mm-hmm.
at the heart of our tribal experience of taking care of each other and being taken care of.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to say more about that later, but let's do finish our survey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if you have the sun in gate 23 or 43, then the earth is going to be in the opposite gate. That makes our the second of these three that we're going to talk about, the channel 2343, which is the channel of structuring, a design of individuality. Gate 43 is the gate of insight. It's that ability to tap into direct knowingness, that ability to listen and trust one's own internal wisdom. And there's a kind of a deafness to that gate, which makes us naturally resistant to listening to the collective because it's part of its individual circuitry. Its opposite gate is called the gate of assimilation, gate 23. And this is all about the capacity to communicate radical ideas in a way that brings transformation. So together, if you have the whole channel of structuring, it gives you the ability to simply present new ideas that can have a transformative impact on the world. So it's sometimes called the channel of the genius to the freak. You know, if what you're wanting to present is not solicited, or there's no openness to be heard, then you're going to sound like a freak. But if you are valued for your insights and invited, then you can seem, you often say things that are genius when you have this channel. Now, the third one, if you have the Sun or Earth in gate 34 or gate 20, which are Sagittarian and Gemini gates, then you have the opposite one. And this channel is called the channel of charisma. It's a design where words must become deeds, where thoughts must become deeds. So it is the prototypical manifesting generator channel. If you have this channel, you're automatically a manifesting generator. And so there's that powerful linkage between the sacral right directly to the throat, meaning that you act in the world with a real potent expression. It's powerful, it's self-absorbed, it's natural. And that's why it's so charismatic, is because somebody who's acting from that place of being totally absorbed in taking action is going to be very compelling and very admirable to people who see them doing that. So those are the three channels, Kris. Does that make sense?
Okay.
You're following?
Yeah, no, I understand about the opposition and all of those, but what is the significance of these channels? Like, what is the whole? I understand that they're in opposition, but does this make them more or less important in a chart? Or like, why are we looking at these channels separate from others? Like, what is it that attracted you to pull these out?
Well, that's a very good question, and that's the heart of why I wanted to bring this up today. These are the most common channels. More people have them than any of the other channels. I don't know what the stats would be, but just by virtue that they're formed by that opposition of Sun and Earth, they're automatically there. Is somebody with 3740, which is a Pisces Virgo opposition, if they have their Sun or one of their nodes in that, they automatically have the channel. So that's why it shows up more frequently. Now, the fun part for you and I, because I want your input on this, it's like riff with me, Kris. Okay, so I like to think of, that God has his reasons for everything, right? So why would he make these three channels more common? Well, you got the 30, let's start with the 3420. The 3420 is a Gemini Sagittarius opposition, and this is deeply charismatic. It's the throat is where things get expressed, where things get acted upon. And so you have the sacral, the pulse of life within us that has easy access to the throat. And so these are people who act in the world. They're workhorses. They love what they do. They're absorbed in the doing of that. And so the gate of the now, gate 20, is all about being present in this moment. I really must look it up, because I really wonder if Eckhart Tolle has that gate. In his book, The Power of Now. Right. And there's the gate of the now. So, this is where this, in a sense, is very Zen. It's somebody who's living in a very vital way, where their vitality gets to the throat, gets into life, gets into expression immediately. And so they almost, they act with a naturalness, which is quite amazing to the rest of us. As long as they're in alignment, they really have the opportunity to be in that flow that we talk about, living life in the flow, and showing us that that's possible as a as a thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So I like to think, it's like, oh, okay. So this charisma, this where thoughts must become deeds here. These are people who are not hypocritical. These are people who are very powerful in the way they live their life. They get a lot done oftentimes. And it's like, okay, well, maybe that makes sense. And it's a very individual circuitry too.
Mm-hmm.
These people are, these people are very in alignment with themselves, a little bit more easily, perhaps naturally. And so I like to think, okay, why would God want a good number of people in the world to have that? Because it keeps us grounded in the moment, perhaps.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the 2343, the channel of structuring, that's all about being resistant to the programming of the not self mind. These are the people that just know things and who are willing to communicate it and who have the ability to communicate it in a way that's going to change the thinking of the world. So I could see that being really important in the overall schema of the world.
It's like the prophets.
The prophets, yes, and the ones who can always take action. So the 3420 and the 2343, they are both part of individual circuitry. So they are less defined, less conditioned by the collective than perhaps the rest of us would be.
Right.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, so having said that now, 3740, this is the heart of the bargain in the community.
Mm-hmm.
And, this is what keeps the tribes together. This is what has allowed us to build up and build up this is what has allowed us to gather together in communities and cities and megacities and live in relative peace together. I mean, you could say, well, are we really at peace? But the thing is, we do live in these huge cities and we haven't, there's problems, but we haven't self-destructed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So this is at the heart of our community experience.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But the interesting thing, Kris, is that human design says that for the last 300 years, 400 years, we've been under the cross of planning, which has one of its arms is the 3740.
Mm-hmm.
And we are about to shift a 400-year pattern from being on the cross of planning, which has allowed the buildup of large organizations and governments and this idea of living together in huge megacities. It's allowed that to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
But we're about to shift according to human design because the precession of the equinoxes is shifting the placement. I think that's what it is. I'd have to research that. I should have for this class, for this talk. But we're going to be in 2027, we shift into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is made up of gate 55, the gate of spirit, and gate 39 or 51, 59, the gate of intimacy, and 34 and 20. So this is very, very individual. And all of a sudden, we're going to be shifting from a theme that has kept us in the matrix, maybe you could say, and it's shifting us to a very individualistic gate. Mm-hmm. And so our ability to live together in the way that we have been doing is going to radically shift.
Well, because what comes to me when you start talking about the different gates that we're moving into is what we talk about in human evolution into recognizing the fact that we are spirit and acting from that place. Our whole way of being and listening to the understanding that we are spirit, not flesh first, and being able to see and hear and be in the world in a different way than we were in the past is what comes to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
And so it is this forecast from the human design is very much aligning with the intuitive sort of feelings that many people are having.
mhm,
So we have only 4 years left in the cross of planning, and then we move into a much more individualistic time.
mhm,
And so for any of us who can, in a sense, cultivate our own uniqueness, our own channel, our own way of being, especially in alignment through strategy and authority, we're going to be further ahead when we get to that point 4 years from now.
mhm.
Um, as we move into what will be very much more individualistic. And as human design predicts, at that point, there's going to be a slow change start, which we'll see the human society be much more a major reduction in population worldwide,
Mhm.
because the energy will no longer sustain our accumulation of population like it has.
Mhm.
So to me, I see these three channels as a bit of a, you know, it's kind of like a way of eavesdropping on God's sort of plans for us.
Mhm.
And okay, what has he built into us?
Mhm.
Do you have any other thoughts on that? Because I mean, these three channels are pretty intriguing.
No, I don't think I have any other insights. I think that was the big one that came to me. So, I
What's
guess, sorry.
one thing to point out here is that these three channels are very yeah. There's only three of them that are like this. And interestingly, moving from the cross of planning, which contains the 3740, we move into another cross that just so happens to have um, another channel of these three, which is the 3420. So
Mhm.
this is very individualistic, and so that underlines and sort of powers that process as well. It's a very unique time in human history.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you so much for the insight. So with that, if there isn't anything else that you want to add, we'll sign off for today and we'll see everybody next Wednesday at 9 a.m. And we'll say God bless, take care, and thanks for joining us today.